You know, when you dig into ancient texts, you come across some truly wild stuff. And one of the most fascinating has to be the mention of giants. Yeah, actual giants walking the earth. Their story is one of the biggest enigmas in the Bible. So today, we're going to try and unravel that mystery, the mystery of the Nephilim.
So, it all kicks off with this one huge question that has puzzled people for, well, centuries. Who exactly were the Nephilim? The book of Genesis brings them up and then just as quickly moves on, leaving this massive question mark hanging in the air.
Okay, first things first, it's really important to know that our English word giant is kind of a catch-all. The original Hebrew actually has several different words for these beings. You've got the Nephilim, which means something like the fallen ones. Then there are the Rephaim, who are described as this ancient, powerful race. And get this, you've even got the Emim and the Zamzummim, and their names literally mean terrifying ones and roaring ones. So right away, you can see that each name points to a whole different story.
Genesis 6:4 is pretty much all we have to go on, and it is incredibly brief. It just tells us that the Nephilim were around back when the sons of God had children with the daughters of men. Their kids are called Gibborim, which means mighty warriors or, men of renown, and that's it. That's where the biblical account just kind of leaves us hanging.
So yeah, the story in the Bible feels like a footnote to something much, much bigger, right? It sets the scene, but it definitely doesn't give us the whole script. But luckily for us, another ancient Jewish text from around that same time decided to fill in all the juicy details.
And this is where the book of Enoch steps in. Now, this ancient book isn't in most Bibles today, but wow, does it provide a dramatic backstory for the Nephilim. It was a story that a lot of people knew back then, and it would end up having a huge impact on what they believed about the spiritual world.
The book of Enoch breaks the story down into 4 pretty clear steps. First, you have a group of 200 angels, and they're called Watchers, who come down to earth. Second, they marry human women. Third, their kids are born as giants. And fourth, these giants basically go on to corrupt and just destroy everything.
And look, when Enoch says great giants, he is not exaggerating. The text claims their height was 3,000 cubits. A cubit is about 1.5 feet, which means these giants were nearly a mile tall. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that. It's a scale that's almost impossible for us to even imagine.
According to Enoch, these giants had this bottomless, destructive appetite. First, they ate all the food that humans produced. When that wasn't enough, they started eating the animals. And then, in a really horrific twist, they started eating people.
So what in the world happened to these monsters? Well, this is where the story in the Bible and the story in the book of Enoch really split. And they lead to 2 completely different fates and 2 very different ways of thinking about the world.
All right, so here's the big difference. In the Bible's version, giants like Goliath and King Og are treated like physical, mortal enemies. Yeah, they're huge and powerful, but they can be killed. In the book of Enoch, though, it's way more complicated. The great flood comes and destroys their physical bodies, sure, but their spirits are left behind to just roam the earth. And to make the biblical account feel more real, the text gives us these little concrete details. For example, the book of Deuteronomy mentions that King Og, one of these giant kings, had an iron bed that was over 13 feet long. So he was a massive guy, no doubt, but still a physical person. This is a huge contrast to the almost unimaginable scale of the giants we read about in Enoch.
And this brings us to the biggest legacy of the Enochian story. Because what happens when you have these powerful, evil, disembodied spirits just wandering around? Well, you get an origin story for something else entirely.
The book of Enoch gives a pretty straightforward answer. These spirits became demons. The text says it explicitly, that the spirits of these dead giants are the evil spirits upon the earth that would go on to plague humanity. That is a massive theological idea, and it's one you just don't find in the Old Testament.
And this wasn't some fringe belief either. We have evidence from writings like the Dead Sea Scrolls that shows this whole story was a central part of Jewish belief for centuries. People widely accepted it. Fallen angels came down. They had giant kids. The flood destroyed their bodies, and their leftover spirits became the demons that caused trouble in the world.
So let's just recap for a second. The ancient world, as these texts describe it, wasn't just filled with people and angels. It was a world teeming with a whole host of monstrous, powerful beings, and each one had its own unique story. You've got the Nephilim, the giant hybrids, and the Rephaim, an entire race of giants. But it didn't stop on land. The ancient Hebrews also told stories about the Tannin, which were these great sea monsters, and of course, the ultimate chaos beast of the sea, the Leviathan. Now here's a crucial point.
The Book of Enoch is not part of the standard biblical canon, the official collection of sacred texts, for most traditions, though the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is a major exception. But just because it was excluded doesn't mean it wasn't incredibly important and influential back in the day.
And here's the proof right here. The New Testament book of Jude actually quotes a prophecy directly from the book of Enoch. This tells us, without a doubt, that the earliest Christian writers knew this book, they were reading it, and they even considered it an authoritative source worth quoting in their own sacred writings.
And that just leaves us with this one last fascinating question to think about. The story of the giants and the origin of demons is this perfect example of how really popular books, even ones that aren't in the official collection, can totally shape what people believe. It kind of makes you wonder, right? How do the stories we tell around a book change the way we actually understand the book itself?